If you're working incredibly hard and you're driven to stay in great shape and really focused on eating right and worrying about your weight all the time, you may be actually be doing the wrong things. In fact, the worst things to give yourself a long and healthy life. In this podcast, I'm going to dive into what are the root causes of longevity in the blue zones on the earth, those places where people live much longer, where there are far more centenarians than the general population. And I'm going to identify what those root factors are, and they are going to surprise you. Hi, I'm Ravi Tangri, and this is Soul Engineering Your Life and Your Work. And this is where we find those tiny little pressure points where you can put a little bit of effort here, a little bit of effort there, and all of your life shifts and transforms to become much more fulfilling, where you can bring all of your heart and soul into every part of your life. Today, I want to dive into what is it that gives us a long and healthy life. And there are many people who are incredibly driven about fitness, who are incredibly focused on what they eat, on dieting, and are looking at their weight. And they may actually be doing the worst things possible for having a long and healthy life. To identify what is actually important, what I'm going to dive into is what happens in the blue zones on Earth. These are people who live incredibly long, areas of the Earth where there's far more centenarians. People live to 90, 100 more than the general population, and what it is that happens. So some of these areas are Sardinia, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Ikaria, and Okinawa. Now, these things change, okay? For example, in Okinawa, as it's become more westernized and things are happening, the younger generations are actually not living as long. So they are shifting as places become quote unquote more modernized, more westernized. And there's some immediate things that you can see that are different. There's low exposure to tobacco and processed foods. There's a high amount of daily low intensity movement as part of life. They don't drive for heavy exercise intensity. The diets are plant dominant, modest calories. They don't worry about what they eat. They just eat healthier in that. There's tight social integration. So you have incredible support to alleviate stressors and such. And faith and purpose are really important. What's interesting is genetics is a factor, but it's an incredibly minor factor. It's way down at the bottom of the list. However, if you take a look at all of the studies that are out there, you can do what's called a factor analysis, which is looking at what's the root causes underneath all of these surface elements. And a first level of factor analysis reveals several latent factors like metabolic load and damage. So this has to do with diet, not smoking, daily movement. Social support, family, there's a lot of multi-generational support, supportive environment, there's good public health, and genetics and demographics are there, but they're the smallest influence. But you can go deeper into your analysis, and this is where the surprises happen. The biggest factor under everything that permeates all of those elements is much lower levels of chronic stress. They are so much better at stress regulation and recovery because that feeds into all of those other elements. There's also energy balance, cellular maintenance. So that has to do with movement and diet and so on. But social regulation, belonging, meaning, and purpose come out really clear as factors. But the biggest of all is the much lower levels of chronic stress. It impacts everything. It disrupts your energy balance. It erodes social bonds if you've got chronic stress. It suppresses meaning in life. In the blue zones, they have far more ways to downshift and reset the stress level. Their rituals with family, with purpose, with what you're doing, prayers, naps, shared meals, gardenings. They're ritualized ways that let them depressurize, release the stress. So, what are some of the differences between the general population and those who are healthier, like in the blue zones? Let's take a look at different aspects. So, in the mornings, those who are in the blue zones, those who are healthier, awake, rested, and calm, whereas most of the rest of the population wakes with a racing mind and anxiety, and you get the emails and the socials and the doom scrolling. You immediately grab your phone and you're into the busyness of the day. In the workday, people who are regulating the stress levels have focused breaks, relaxed breathing deep in the belly. I have, for many years, gone into organizations and I've challenged people to say, look, just for 1 week, take breaks where you walk away from your desk. Do not eat lunch at your desk. Go somewhere else. Ideally, in these times, go out. And 100% of the time, people come back sheepishly a week later and say, yeah, I was more productive. It's a total delusion to believe that you get more done if you don't take breaks. Not possible. We do not operate that way. And those who live with chronic stress are under continuous pressure. Breathing is shallow. So they're not really breathing. There's no breaks. And that pressure goes on throughout the workday. In the evening, the people that are healthier ease into rest. They wind down with social or quiet activity. There is a digital sunrise, no screens for an hour or two before bed. So you can ease into sleep. When you have the screens, it makes you alert and it makes it much harder to sleep. Whereas the people who live with chronic stress are wired. They can't switch off. They're carrying all the stuff from the day. They're doom scrolling or diving into alcohol to relax. And those are the rituals that they have, which are not healthy at all. When it comes to sleep, people who are healthier have a deep, consistent sleep. They wake refreshed. Those with chronic stress have fragmented sleep. You're waking up all the time. You wake early or often. You're tired when you get up. You're always exhausted. And it extends into the physiological as well. People who are healthier have steady energy, clear focus, whereas those with chronic stress are always dealing with tension, cravings. They're jittery to some extent, fatigue, immune issues. And that's no surprise because every time a little stressor hits you, and I'm talking about little stressors, not even the big one. It catalyzes over 30 hormonal changes and 1,400 chemical changes, most of which are toxic, and a lot of which wear down your immune system and age you. And a lot of these chemicals keep permeating if you don't know how to stop them in your body for 6 hours or more. So each one of those adds and adds and adds. And how often do you have those little annoyances in a day? And do you depressurize to release that? Most people don't. Now, here's what's interesting. There are people who are obsessively focused on weight loss and on exercise. And what this actually does is it increases stress and ironically can lead to shorter lifespan. And underneath this, there's an inherent element of a dissatisfaction with your current state. I mean, think about it. If you look in the mirror, do you feel good about yourself? A lot of people don't. So they're always looking at diets or feeling guilty if they eat the wrong things, adding to the stress. The people who are obsessively focused on fitness that have to do this, are actually adding to the stress. The people in the blue zones have gentle daily movement put into all of their lives. It's integrated. So nothing, I'm not saying exercise is bad, eat healthy eating is bad, but moderate exercise where it's a joy, where it's fun, what's enjoyable, not something you're forcing yourself to do. Movement, what is it that you can do? Not just going intensely for an hour every day or two, but how can you build more movement into your life? So this brings about the big question. How do you switch if you really want to be healthier, if you really want to live longer and healthier? How do you switch? Well, a lot of this, there's a chronic element. That's why they call it chronic stress. And I believe there's an addictive element because those 30 hormonal changes, 1,400 chemical changes, I believe we become addicted to those and we look for those and we need those, especially when they continue on for 6 hours or more. Think about it. You may have had all these stresses at work, and then you come home. It may be a peaceful time at home, but you're still jittery. That's those chemicals pumping through your body. So there's an element there where you have to shift something deeply internally, and you may need support from counseling or from coaching to be able to shift those patterns. That's deep work. And you may need to work at that, but there for some time, that can be a life journey or a significant journey. I've worked with a lot of people in that transition, and it takes, it really takes some time and support to be able to shift those deeply ingrained habits like ruts in our neurophysiology that we have to shift into new patterns. But there are some things that you can do. There's a number of things that you can do on a smaller level to give yourself perhaps some breathing space. Simple thing is to bring in mindfulness practice. And this isn't just meditation. It can be time in nature. A lot of runners who say they get into the zone once they're running and that sense of flow. For me, dance is a mindfulness practice because I have to be so fully present with my partner and the music to choreograph in that moment. So to find what works for you for mindfulness, it's not just sitting and going om. Sleep is a huge thing. That is the biggest builder of resilience. And one of the significant things you can do for that is what I mentioned, a digital sunset 1 to 2 hours before you sleep. You can also set an alarm to tell you that you have to get ready to sleep. So if you want to go to bed at 10 o'clock, you figure out how much sleep you want. If you want 8 hours sleep and you want to be up at 6, so you got to be in bed by 10, set an alarm for 9 p.m. All screens gone for the rest of the time. Engage with others in your life or read or whatever, anything that's not digital, and then go to sleep on time. It'll be a huge transition because you're detoxing yourself from those chemicals that you're used to. But start to do it for a week and you will find a huge difference. Set that alarm for 1 hour before you need to sleep. Turn off all screens. Oh, and make sure that your phone is in a different room. Buy a digital alarm clock if you need an alarm in your bedroom. And keep the phone in another room so you don't just grab it when you wake up. Build in mindfulness rituals when you get up so that you're take a nice breath, feel the sheets. When you put your feet down, feel the floor on your feet, the texture, feel the breathing. Just be present to start. With exercise, absolutely. Regular, moderate exercise is good. And how can you build in more daily movement? The people in the blue zones are always walking around, they're gardening, they're doing different things. So how can you build more of that in? If you need to move things, take several trips through the house to move things and be present and mindful as you do that. Another thing you can do to decompress from the stress is how can you reflect as opposed to ruminate? When you ruminate, you're going down a spiral of negativity. Oh my God, I screwed that up. This happened. Oh my God, how can I figure this out? Whereas reflection is, a way to decompress. So it's like, okay, let's start by looking at what worked well, which we ignore, what worked well in the situation, and then how can I do things differently in the future to reflect versus ruminate over everything that went wrong. Hydration is another thing. Lots of water. You've heard all of that. And here's another thing that a lot of people under stress do. They look at chronic stress. They plan these vacations at certain times and they look forward to it. They're in deep stress the rest of their life, but they're going, oh my God, I'm going to go on vacation. Can't wait for that week. Can't wait. They have that week. It's wonderful. And then they come back and 2 days later, it's like they never went away. Yes, absolutely have vacations, but you need to do daily micro recovery every part of your life all the time. So taking short walks in nature, if you take a break in the morning or in the afternoon to actually go out, take a walk in some woods nearby or somewhere, even just to get out, breathe, don't ruminate, breathe nice and deep and slow and just be present. So make sure you've got daily micro recovery, ways to connect with others socially so that you can work. That social support is so incredibly important, even though most of us don't have multi-generational families. How can you keep regular social connection and support? Not to complain about life, but to find connection, ways to move forward, all these wonderful things. I had a couple of women who were in a program of mine years ago, and they realized that at the breaks, people gathered at the water cooler to just complain about work and the boss and everything else. And what they did not say a thing. They just did not engage in those conversations. And they just started new conversations about things they were looking forward to or things they enjoyed in life and whatever. And within a week, the whole group at the water cooler, without letting them know what was happening, had changed that break time into a wonderful, nurturing time where you could defuse the stress response. So it's actually much easier than you might think. You just have to choose and say, oh, okay, that's what's happening. Let's take a look at something else and start to work with that. And again, a final thing is that self-talk. That is the most damaging thing for rumination. And I've shared this with you before. If you want, I've got a free course on how to turn off your self-talk, your monkey mind, whenever you want, just like that. And you can access it for free at silenceselftalk.com. But pick one or two of these things to start with. And if you really want to make change, to be able to shift out of these chronic stress patterns to get at the root issues for you, I'd suggest exploring coaching or counseling support, because this is usually needed with something like this. If you'd like to chat about this, feel free to book a virtual coffee with me at callravi.com. But make sure you get the support you need to be able to make this journey. So pick one or two of these things and see what a difference it can make in your life. And let's start to explore how you can live more mindfully, healthier, and longer. I'm Ravi Tangri, and this is Soul Engineering Your Life and Work.
I got the energy, it's all I need to finish, and everyone